This one kind of surprised us until we went back and read the research literature and realized we shouldn't have been surprised by it. That women are substantially more likely than men to know about innovation and to try to use them. We found that out from our survey. And at first in fact, Charles even wrote, we wrote this little draft of a paper, and he's like, and it was a quite surprising result. And then I went through and read some of the research literature, and I wrote back and said, yeah, we're going to take that out because it shouldn't have been surprising. It's like this finding is out there consistently across different disciplines, and different studies have all found this to be true. That women in general, I think, are more likely to use and value the sort of non-authoritarian, more student-centered, more dialogue-oriented sort of teaching styles, which is what PER lines up with. All right, so I wanted to talk about now, we've got a ton of places where we would love to have people sort of plug in and help us with some of this stuff. What we've done is gotten a lot of data that we have. And a lot of that we haven't had time to analyze. We've had to move on into other projects as projects get funded. We have to move on into that. So I just want to hit some highlights of places where if anyone's interested, we've got stuff that would be interesting to do. AGRI is the Higher Education Research Institute, I think. And they do these surveys every year of faculty nationwide across all disciplines, and they have their data. And you can get their data, and we've written to them and asked for their data, and they've agreed that we can have it. A lot of their data is similar to the data we've collected, so we're interested in this will be a statistical analysis, comparing their results to our results, seeing if we're seeing the same thing. But they also collected things that we didn't collect, like political orientation, interest in spiritual sorts of things, perception of their empowerment, and they collected data from other STEM fields, not just physics. So we're sort of interested in getting this data and doing this analysis and seeing how faculty compare across fields, how consistent is with us, some of these other things that they asked about. We've got the survey that we gave, and we've kind of done the analysis that we're going to do with it. There's still interesting questions in there that you might ask. Like I said, we just kind of at some point had to move on from it. So this is all statistical analysis. And I think someone with a different perspective, too, might see different questions in it than what we see. Right, we've kind of got our perspective, but I think someone with a different sort of theoretical leaning might find different things in there to look at. We're still working through, and would love help on this, the 72 interviews. We're using Atlas TI, which is a software program. Once I started using it, I don't know why I was ever doing this by hand. It's so much easier, so much faster. It's a good program to learn. And we've got, like I said, these interviews. We got 3 papers out of 5 interviews. We now have 72. So you can imagine just the wealth of information and data that is in that could be done.
36 papers worth.
There's way more here than we can possibly ever touch ourselves.
Did you ask it explicitly for perception of what most inhibited faculty members? I mean, you've talked about the environment. You've talked that they're more knowledgeable.
Why they don't use more, why they, if they say that they weren't using peer instruction, why they weren't.
And have you sort of made, or are you in the process of making up sort of this is prioritized kind of?
Yeah, in fact, we're at the point where we know what the common answers are enough that we have a list of them, and we're just going through and counting how many people said each one. Like, we've done enough interviews that we know what the answers are at this point, and we're just coding to find the frequency of it. Okay. But we have a good list of about 10 things that
that'll be very valuable too.
Yeah. That's where we're at now, is working our way through that.
Is number 1 fear of senior faculty?
I don't know what number 1 is. I don't have a good order, but yeah, there is. It's on there. I'm trying to remember what we would call that. It's the lack of departmental support, or worried about the impact that would have in the department or on one's job. I even had one person in an interview who said, "Well, I'm afraid I'd get sued, if I do this interactive stuff." I thought it was a bit over the top, but it's fun. With 72 people, you get all kinds of things in there that make you laugh on occasion.
What was the name of the software you said you used?
Atlas TI, and in fact, I think I'm allowed to have 2 copies of that. So I have one on my laptop, and I was talking with Noah about trying to find a computer somewhere on the 10th floor maybe that people would have access to and installing it there. So anyone who wanted to use it could use it. It takes a little bit of time. It probably took me about a day to figure out how to use it, but it saved me weeks and weeks of work. And like
And
once
we could
for
buy
coding,
it.
yeah.
And you like that better than like in vivo?
I looked at, we needed to make a decision quickly, and so I spent about a day reviewing both in vivo and Atlas TI, and I found I got up to speed a little faster than Atlas, so we went with that. It wasn't, a thorough decision. It was this one's working a little quicker, and they were about the same price, so we just picked one and went with it. But I've been quite happy with Atlas. I highly recommend learning this coding software. It's so much easier and faster than doing it by hand.
And all your interviews are fully transcribed. So
They are, yeah, they're all fully transcribed. And then there's the new faculty workshop study, which we're just now starting. So this would be more, we're trying to figure this out, and what we're doing is we're collecting pre- and post-semester interviews. We're collecting about every other week. We collect a 15-minute worth of something from them. So far, for example, we give them a survey that we'll keep repeating. How are they spending their time? How many hours are they spending on teaching? How many hours are they spending on research? How many hours are they spending writing proposals? That sort of thing. We gave another survey, which is just checking in with them. What are you doing in your class? How do you think it's going? Right. So we just got this that gets repeated over 5 semesters. We're collecting conceptual. We required them to give a conceptual exam pre and post, and share with us their summary of their student evaluations. So we're just like collecting massive amounts of data. It's a little overwhelming at the moment, like what are we going to do with all this stuff? But in the end, we'll have a very rich data set that we can look at over time.
And how many faculty again are you?
We're following 15 for 5 semesters, and then we'll give a survey to hundreds, everybody who's gone through the new faculty workshop in the last 5 years. But the qualitative stuff are these 15, and we've got them. We know who they are. We've picked them out. We're hoping that most of them survive. We're paying them. I should say we pay them quite a good bit of money to, proportionate to their time to participate. So we're hoping that keeps them motivated and in it. So here, Valerie, this is what you're asking about. This is Eric Brew there, who we worked with on when we looked at the modeling stuff. We did this several years ago where we went in and we interviewed the curriculum developers in modeling. And we did write, so where it's at is a PERC. It was a PERC proceedings paper from 2007, I think. So this project is actually a really nice one. If you're interested in this idea of communities and communities of practice, we've done the data's there, it's transcribed. We've done the initial analysis and we've written a PERC paper, but we're all just so busy. Like we intended to turn that into a full paper, and we've just all been very busy with other things, and it hasn't been done. What still needs to be done is some more lit review and development of this idea of communities of practice, what that is and how that applies here, and a little more rigorous analysis of the interviews to get that up to a full paper. So I don't know if anyone's interested in that. Talk to me about it. It's a project that we need to get done.
So May's kind of doing that for her dissertation, so she might.
Oh, so talk to me, because we just need. This is one of those things that the 3 of us have just not had time to finish, and I think realistically we're not going to. And so if someone could come along and just.
But it still sounds to me like it's an assumption that it is the community, and not that it's a bad assumption, but you presented it as a finding, whereas it sounds to me like it's an assumption.
It was one of the claims of testimonies when he started this.
Yeah, but it was
one
a
of the-
claim.
Right, exactly.
It was an assumption. That you made that was made, and you're making, and testimony's made about what leads to success. Because I'm guessing you need like some kind of control, because there are other curricula for which there are communities that do not have the secret symbol that modeling has. The brotherhood and the sisterhood of modeling. I mean, for real. And so I'm betting that even the astronomy thing that you're talking about, it has a community, but not the same level of I'm a modeler.
It's got a pretty high level of identification. Interestingly, there's a core that's introduced at all the workshops. But then people go off and do pretty different implementations, but remain part of the community, talk electronically a lot, and then circle back and do some follow-up workshops. So there, it might almost be easier to make a case that it's the community that's the same for all of them, and the implementation might vary by 30%, but everybody feels like they belong to the community. Everybody brings their challenges back electronically, and I watched the community reach a critical mass. This was very interesting in terms of support. It's sort of like having a website. You know, once it gets to a certain size, then it becomes self-fulfilling. And once there got to be enough people in the community that if you had a problem that you were teaching tomorrow and you needed to solve the problem today, you post it, and you're pretty well guaranteed that somebody out there is going to say, oh yeah, that happened to me last year, and here's what you've got to do. Once people realized it was at that point, then the usage just snowballed. So the community was a rewarding community when it reached a certain size.
Yes, you're right, Valerie, and I think this is part of why it's preferred paper at the moment. But I think there's stuff that could be done to turn it into accounting for some of this.
Well, we want to bring a cultural anthropologist to answer this particular question, I think. What is the nature of community, and how is that the community formed? I think.
Well,
Is that the question? That's not the question.
You better get
That's not the question she
you
proposed.
better get a pretty current one, because even though it's not my area of expertise, it's pretty obvious to me that sense of community is changing with technology.
Sure.
It's changing pretty fast. The things that I would fund if I was serving at NSF right now are pretty different right now than I would 4 years ago. Because this astronomy community, for instance, stays in touch primarily over the web. And it's effective.
Yeah, but I don't think that the nature of what forms community and why community itself is useful and productive and makes people a gang member. I think the mechanism, I think the technologies, I think it's mediated by technologies. Those are changing, so it's facilitating different people participating in different ways.
Right.
No question about it, but I think the undercore principles may, in fact, be very similar.
Although I still say that the assumption that the community makes a person a gang member is an assumption. It's not a finding.
No, I think that...
And it needs to be explored and investigated.
Oh, I thought the assumption was that the community was an essential part of modeling being effective and sustained. That's the assumption. I don't think actually to say that people identifying makes a community. I mean, to me, that's the definition of community, is people identifying.
Well, it would be interesting to be able to ask members of a community more broadly, why do you expend the effort? Why are you a part of the community?
Right.
What do you self-identify as getting from the community? I don't know how much that would vary, but it seems like really important.
And there's been studies done on that with respect to like Alcoholics Anonymous and various other communities.
That's often confused with astronomy.
Yeah, so various other communities with which people identify. I think it's important. But again, we should be careful about the assumption.
Yeah, because we're faculty are probably a little different on the average.
Before you guys real quick, one last project that I have, and this one actually won't kick in for probably about 2 years. It's starting now, but my part of it gets in. These three down here are sociologists at UNC Charlotte. This is Elizabeth Stern, Stephanie Muller, and Roz Mickelson. And it's fun for me because they're like all sociologists, and then there's me, the scientist, working on this project. But it's looking at gender and race in terms of who majors in STEM, looking from grade 6 through college graduation. And we're planning 200 interviews of university seniors, people who, the stayers, so these are people who majored in a science, believers, those who started a science major but left, and then the missed opportunities, those who had everything in place to be a successful science major but decided to major in something else, men, women, and make sure that we've got a representative racial sample as well. So that's, like I said, probably about 2 years before this really kicks in. But that's another